Welcome to all of you, both who live in Barcelona and Catalonia, and those of us who have come some distance to be with you. It's a beautiful morning, and we're very lucky to be in this splendid city. And the signs of the time are there for us all to see, and we can either blind ourselves to them, or we can open up our eyes and figure out that in contemporary society, in this very different 21st century, that the challenge and the point of view are entirely different. We really have to leave the 20th century behind us. If you want a good century in the past, we might go back to the 18th century. That was a good one, the Age of Enlightenment. But here we are, 2011, Barcelona, the 2nd of December, 2011. And we're here under the working title, under the conference title of the Smart City. And I would like to address this briefly because I have some difficulty with this title. I'm afraid to say. It's very attractive on the face of it, but behind the face there's a more difficult reality. The concept of a smart city, or even that other phrase that keeps popping up, intelligent technology, it is to my mind, if interesting as a point of departure to query the need and eventually the direction of change that is required in our cities and our mobility systems, it is somehow a potentially dangerous one. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one at this conference who will bring up this point, but just in case, let me share it with you. The difficulty is that if there is a smart city, it implies, particularly in the context that's being examined here, it implies that it is through technological change that we are going to reach the objectives which are the only ones which are of any importance to us, and that is sustainable development and social justice. And sustainable development has to start now. And social justice has to start now. And we have so many indicators of the importance, the vital importance of both of these things, that it really doesn't, the point really doesn't need to be made other than to bring it up. So we have to understand that what we need to be smart, what we need to be intelligent is ourselves. We need to learn to use our brains better. And technology will have a role in the future of the sustainable city. In fact, since we can't go backward, we have to go forward. And in order to do that, there's going to be plenty of technology. And we'll talk about technologies a little bit in the 20 or so minutes that you've so kindly given to me. So a little careful on the smart city. We, the people, we're the problem, and so we, the people, have to be the solution. And so in the context of this session and the other things that I've seen this week, which has been very interesting, I have confidence that this point of view is really starting to come through. The second point of my presentation today is concerning the new mobility agenda, the new mobility agenda of the 21st century. And this, of course, is an agenda which is not just a little shopping list, but it is a fundamental paradigm change from everything we learned in all of our great schools and great courses and great technical preparations in the 20th century. In a way, I think that we didn't see the 21st century coming. We assumed that the 21st century was going to look like the 20th century, with a few more gadgets in it that would make life more agreeable for us. There will be, and there are already in this already getting old, 21st century, plenty of gadgets. But that's not what life is all about. Um, Characteristics of the new mobility agenda is that it involves uh, an ability to deal with complexity and with contradiction and with chaos. There are no universal answers. Something that might be a perfectly reasonable solution today might turn out to be a massive problem tomorrow. So we need to be able to better anticipate what the reaction to the reaction to the reaction of our action is going to be. A little bit like that Eastern Canadian tribe that whenever they have a significant decision, the elders of the Indian village sit around in a circle and they consider what is going to be the implications for 7 generations. We don't see very many industrialists, or we don't see very many politicians trying to think even a generation out. And that is, I think, one of our major failings. So in the new mobility agenda, we never get quite comfortable. If we're comfortable, that's because we're probably wrong. So we need to be consistently uncomfortable, and we need to be consistently getting conflicting views and conflicting opinions from across the community. And the role of leadership and the role of communications is to somehow do the best you can do with these contradictions. And the way that you ensure that your solution is just and wise is to orient it entirely to the needs, the priorities, and the availabilities of the bottom 80% of society. The top 20%, by the way, almost all car owners, so plenty of access to cars, and able to afford having a car, quite an expensive exercise today, we shouldn't be worrying about them. They've got enough money and enough brains and enough contacts, they'll figure it out for themselves. So what we're going to attempt to focus on altogether in the new mobility agenda is the, can't we call it the bottom 80%, or maybe the supporting 80% of society? And that is our test. Now, other than that, the only two things that I can think from a strategic perspective, in terms of the politics of the new mobility agenda, the first is bad news. We want the bad news as early as possible. We do not want the bad news to be late, and we do not want to hide from the bad news. That's a part of it. And the second part of it is when someone like me, who's an advisor, provides counsel, many of you here in the audience, both working directly with cities or government agencies or consultants or university professors, we have to be focusing on strategies that are going to succeed. Success is imperative. And there's nothing wrong with a small success. We can build on many small successes because we know that the solution to the mobility problems of our communities is going to be the result of our doing a very large number of mainly very small things. We are not going to be able to build metros that are going to solve all of our problems, or monorails or PRT systems. That won't work. A good metro system will drain somewhere between 4 or 5%, and at most twice that, of the total passenger trips in any community. Because in the old days, in the 20th century, most of the paths were linear. And increasingly over the 20th century, the cities exploded from one-to-one or one-to-many to a many-to-many situation. And a many-to-many situation calls for many diverse solutions. Now, we have a strategic frame for the new mobility agenda, and I'll run right down it. It consists of 7 different points. The first is the one that we've mentioned here, that is equity and social justice. That's the first. The second is we must be looking at systemic performance, not the performance of from A to B, or not the performance in or around a node, but systemic. How is our system going to move and to absorb resources and to pollute and to endanger and to function from a systemic perspective. The third thing that we need to be very careful about, which we have not been careful about, and that has been part of the reason that we've destroyed our cities and destroyed many lives in terms of the fact that we've spaced out our cities as a result of the couple of technologies which have allowed us to do that. Most notably, of course, the automobile, but also rail transit has done it. It has exploded the city. It has increased distances. And in order to serve the people who are using these space bulimic systems, we have to go fast. So the other half of space is speed, and the other half of speed is danger. So we have to be very, very careful about this space vector. The next one is real simple. You know, here I am in Spain, and I don't have to say this to you. It reminds me of the expression of Sir Ernest Rutherford, Nobel Prize winner and professor of physics, who at the end of the First World War was put in charge of Cavendish Laboratory. And he met his senior colleagues and the first time, and he said, "Gentlemen, we've got a problem. We don't have," let me see if I can quote his exact words, "we have no money, gentlemen, so we are obliged to think." So we need to be investing public money and private money in a very economically efficient manner, which has not been what we've done in the past with large infrastructure projects. So we need to find ways to get a lot of mileage out of relatively little money, and that we're going to be able to do through strategies that we'll be talking about here in this meeting, here in this session. The next one, which is absolutely critical and important, and it seems to have gotten forgotten. Well, in any event, we have a situation in which we've spent more than half a century creating as one of the primary vectors of investment strategy in the transport sector, labor-saving devices. We wanted to save labor, and boy, have we saved labor. We've saved labor, and we created endemic high unemployment rates because we've saved labor. So in the future, one of the goals of our transportation system will be to improve the quality and the variety of transportation services, and at the same time create good new jobs or preserve good old jobs. Some of those old jobs were not very good. Think in terms of a suicidal shared taxi driver in a third world city who drives too fast, whose vehicle has not been properly maintained, who swerves in order to pick up clients. Almost everything that can go wrong does go wrong every day, and yet it continues to exist. These are important jobs, and these are important services. And these are services which need to be improved and integrated into a unified, coherent, consistent transportation strategy. We've talked about all of this, and we haven't talked about mobility. So let's do that. First of all, cars, what is the role of cars in the new mobility agenda? And we know, I mean, we're not crazy, right? And we're not blind, right? We know there are going to be plenty of cars in the future of our cities. But we want to have less cars, probably a lot less cars, but we want to have better mobility. And a lot of that mobility is going to be provided by wheeled vehicles with motors that are driven by people, providing jobs. And this is part of the pattern. But the vehicles, the automobiles themselves, will be, of course, used radically differently. There will be car sharing, ride sharing, taxi sharing, street sharing, time sharing, many forms of sharing. And the vehicles, instead of being our property, now become something which responds to what Socrates said, I think it was 5 centuries before this Common Era, when he said that true wealth is not in ownership, but in use. So we're going to move away from having to own, so many of us, our own cars. There will still be many people owning their cars. But this ownership patterns and use patterns of automobiles are going to alter radically. And this is a process which is currently going on and extremely important. And of course, rather upsetting for the traditional manufacturers, as well as policymakers who just can't believe that these new things, which seem to be so small, are so important and part of a greater whole. So at the same time that we are constraining the private car through fair pricing, so it will cost you 2 or 3 or 4 times more to park your car, through restriction of the road space which is available for moving vehicles, and for the very strong restriction in cities of parking space which is available. So there will be fewer parking spaces, they'll cost a lot more money, and you'll have less room to get around. And as you're sitting in traffic, because congestion is a policy, as you're sitting in traffic, you can just watch the buses and the shared vehicles zooming on by you. And you'll say, maybe tomorrow I'll do this in another way. Now, how do we achieve these objectives? Again, a short list. One of the things that is striking as me as a transportation observer is the amount of time in which people say, this city is doing so well. And 2 examples which come up again and again in Latin America and in the world are Curitiba and Bogota. And so people dream about the Curitiba solutions and the Bogota solutions, but it ain't true. Why is it not true? Why is it that cities that have innovated in important ways and are still doing this are not doing very well today? And that is because lack of continuity in leadership. And in fact, and I'm afraid we're going to see this in Spain with the change of government, that there will be a rejection of the ways of thinking and the policies of the previous government that will be cast aside, and much knowledge with them, and they will be replaced by a new set of principles, which is just death for a city, because a city needs to have continuity over time. In a city which is well planned, you're going to have unsuccessful operations, but the continuity allows you to look at them, deal with them, and improve on them. Whereas if you keep going from left to right, from north to south, you do not have the continuity which is necessary in order to ensure that your city is going to do its job. This could go on forever, and I'm now already, let's take a look here, I'm fully into my available time. So let me see if I can break off one of the alternative modes, uh, which are important, are going to be important, are already important in the future of our cities, and which have a importance here in Barcelona with Avantcar, and new projects coming up all the time. What about car sharing? I'll just write down my shopping list here. First of all, to mention that there's nothing new about car sharing. Ever since there were cars, there was car sharing. And if today the world focuses on projects like Zipcar, and Robin Chase, the founder, one of the founders of Zipcar, will be speaking to us today. That is only the tip of the iceberg. There is a huge amount of informal car sharing, which goes on in the world, and always has. And in addition, there are, let's call them new systems, car sharing approach, in which the cars will be lent to people by other people, so-called peer-to-peer car sharing. Now, I don't need to take any of your time with this here, other than to simply say that, so when you think about car sharing, it's not only old-fashioned car sharing, i.e. Zipcar, corporate car sharing, etc. I say old-fashioned just in order to try to stimulate you at this point. So the nature of car sharing is that it's going to be very different in the future. And why do people car sharing? Why do people share cars? It's simple. Because it's convenient. It's economical. Those are the reasons that they do it. People may do it because it makes them feel good about the environment, but it's the combination of convenience and economics, and we'll be hearing a lot about that. The future of car sharing will have 4 main vectors that are already working themselves out. The first is invisible car sharing. And this is hundreds of operations around the world, really thousands, in which people are informally or semi-formally, but for the most part invisibly, sharing their cars. Then there is the second, which we can call the organized car sharing, what Susan Shaheen calls CSO, car sharing organizations. They will be a part of the future. Then there is the entire concept of peer-to-peer car sharing, which is also going to be talked about. Robin Chase and others will be talking about it here. And then the final one, I don't remember what it is. I'm like Governor Perry. I just don't remember what it is. So these alternative car share concepts will be competing for the market. When you think in terms of car sharing in a place like India or in Africa, what you really do is you suddenly veer off into the concept of actually taxi sharing and ride sharing. So the boundaries between these various modes are not made out of steel. There is one last point about car sharing that's kind of it would be the bad news if we weren't aware of it. By being aware of it, it becomes the good news. And that is very few cities have developed a well thought out car sharing policy, which itself is within the framework of a well thought out global new mobility policy. So there's a lot of work to be done on that. Why has it not been done? Well, it doesn't fit in with the traditional orientation of cities to think in terms of their transportation mandate as something which involves, above all, the provision of infrastructure. So it's a new world. They pop up And cities will say, well, maybe there's something we should be doing, because the car share operators will be asking them, we'd like some parking, please. And they will say, and maybe we can be doing some things for you here in the city. We can provide you with our technology-based services for management of fleet cars. And so all of this, insurance problems, etc., need to be brought together into a coherent car sharing package, but it doesn't make any sense if it's not in the overall frame. So the key to the future of car sharing is the city. And the key to the city is not only what they do, but what they look at. And maybe this is a good way to close this talk, which has gone on for a bit too long. And that is that one splendid thing about cities in the 21st century is that they look at each other. They look at each other and they compete. Barcelona competes with Paris and Lyon, and Barcelona competes with cities around the world, as does Paris. As does even smaller cities will compete within a smaller range. So the competition is there, and if your city is going to be world level in terms of its quality, that has nothing to do with the size, that has to do with the quality of your performance. If your city is going to be a world level city, it's got to have certain things, you know. It has to be a city in which it's safe to walk. It has to be a city in which it's agreeable to get around by bicycle. It has to be a city in which people can get to where they want to go without spending enormous amounts of time. So the other half of the mobility coin is proximity. And this means, of course, that transportation policy has to be oriented. Everyone in this audience knows that. Has to be orchestrated hand in hand with land use policy. Let me leave you with one wish for Barcelona and for your cities. If I would be able to leave a message with you, and that you might choose to do something with it, this would make this too long talk very worthwhile. And that is, I would like to invite you all to recalibrate. Recalibrate, what could that mean? Well, it means that you take a look at your overall mobility system and you say, I'm going to use the wonderful skills of our traffic managers and transportation engineers and our transportation providers, and I'm going to recalibrate the system. I'm going to bring down top speeds so that only on major avenues, major feeder roads in the city, coming into the city, will the traffic be going 50 kilometers an hour. As soon as it hits the city itself, it slows down to 30 kilometers an hour on all roads, except for those roads that are in neighborhoods in which we want to have people on the street, spending time on the street, spending time with each other, playing, talking. So we need to have a policy in which a third of the streets of the city have speed limits at 15 kilometers an hour. Now, how do you do this? Well, you do it in stages. You do it by creating a strong consensus for it. You do it by working together with the enormous technical virtuosity of the men, women, and the technology and the knowledge that they have. And you simply recalibrate the system and you bring down the top speeds. You with all of the benefits that this brings with it, you improve flows, giving the advantage in terms of space to more efficient vehicles. And by recalibrating, you waste less energy, you pollute less, you have lower noise, you have fewer accidents, you have fewer grave accidents, and you have a more beautiful city, because isn't that what this is all about? Smart city? Not a bad idea, but what about beautiful city? Thank you very much.